Hey, Coach Patrick here, Endurance Nation, back with another weekly broadcast. This week's topic, motivation. I think motivation ends up being one of the most interesting parts of what it means to be an endurance athlete. It's something that's all around us in terms of motivation, our choices, the way that we participate or engage, the way that we tackle new challenges or continue to wrestle with old ones. A lot of it is centered and based around motivation. Many times we consider motivation to be an external source, right? People are cheering you on in a marathon. People are thanking you for the work you're doing at work or maybe in your service position or whatever it is. Your family members, loved ones support you, keep you on track, encourage you, give you attaboys for lack of a better term, or you're awesome or you rock statements about the work that you're doing. And a lot of times we look at motivation being an external thing, but actually I believe the strongest motivation comes from within. And when you spend enough time as an endurance athlete, as most of us are wont to do, on a long adventure, be it cycling, running, hiking, adventure racing, kayaking, swimming, whatever it is, we have a lot of time with ourselves. We have a lot of time thinking internally. And I believe that those conversations are where motivation matters the most and sometimes can even be the spring of motivation. So I want to talk a little bit about motivation today and understand how you can use it yourself to be more successful over time. So a little less tangible this week, a little less data oriented, but still an important topic to have. Okay. First of all, let's start off with this. There's a crisis of motivation, and the crisis of motivation is pretty simple. Right now, what's happening is there's motivation, easy tidbits of motivation everywhere, little like tic tacs of motivation. I can go to Instagram and see pictures. I can go to Facebook and see stories. I can go to TikTok and see people doing crazy achievements or challenges. It's never been easier to see the things that other people are doing and to be inspired by those events. To be like, oh my goodness, look at that person. He ran a marathon backwards in Antarctica and saved the entire global population of baby seals with one flipper. Incredible, moving, amazing, motivational, but really those things end up being like motivational candy. And I say motivational candy because there's no substance to them. If I see a 10-second clip or I see a picture of someone doing something, there's nothing else around that story that really helps me understand what took that person, what took that athlete to that place, what inspired them, what got them there, what are the pieces of the puzzle that made them tick, that made them successful in that endeavor. And to me, that's where motivation is. Motivation is in their operating system, not the outcomes. And so we have to unpack a little bit about it. So don't be very aware when you're on social networks, just surfing stuff and seeing stuff, that you're triggering that sort of motivation response, but we're not sustaining it in a way that's creating adaptation or developing real motivation. And so you can certainly do that. I recommend not doing it late at night because you'll be there all the time. But I do recommend that you understand the differences between that eye candy type of motivation or really surface motivation and the deeper motivation that would be more meaningful for endurance athletes as it comes to their personal performance, be it on the race course or at the work or at home or whatever it may be. All right. So first, let's talk a little bit about motivation across the course of a day. Let's break it down to a super micro unit. So you're training for an event. Today, you've got sessions on the calendar, you got work, you got family, all sorts of things. Where's the motivation? What does that look like across the course of the day? Generally speaking, motivation starts off pretty high once you get out of bed. Most people have a gravitational pull to staying horizontal, but once you're out of the bed, motivation generally is high. And then over the course of the day, it really wanes. A lot of people will end up working out in the morning because later in the day, it's much harder psychologically to get a workout done and also schedule-wise, etc., if you've let the day get in the way. It's not that your motivation is any less. If you haven't used the motivation in the morning, then you should theoretically have the same amount of motivation later in the day. And I believe you do. The challenge is that life has also stacked up lots of other things on top of that motivation. So I know we took our beautiful motivation and we put it right here. And we said, I'll be back later. I'll check on you. And then all across the course of the day, people came and put stuff next to it. They covered it up. They pushed it in the corner, etc. So you come back later in the day and look for your motivation. There's lots of other stuff there now, and it's hard to actually find that motivation. It's not that you're any less motivated, but the priorities have shifted across the course of the day. When you started off with very little inbound noise or friction to now later in the day when there's lots of noise and friction, and it's really hard to get your head wrapped around what it means to even find that motivation. Now we got to go get it. Like, where do I put it? Where is it? I got to dust it off and get myself ready. And so motivation itself doesn't necessarily deplete across the course of the day, but it does become challenged as a system by the other things inside your life that get in the way. And this goes the same for the week. Monday through Sunday, it's much harder to get motivated later in the week because we're more fatigued. There's more fun things to do on weekends, other opportunities, the schedule is different. It becomes more challenging. I think it's important that we understand that motivation itself isn't necessarily a finite or infinite resource, but its efficacy is dependent upon when you decide to use it. And across the course of a day, it's much stronger earlier in the day than it is later in the day. Okay. Number 2, how do we manufacture motivation? So if we know that it's there, right? We know that my motivation is here, but later in the day I don't have it, or maybe you're just struggling from work or from other stressors, and your motivation isn't really what it used to be here on Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning or whenever that is. How do you actually go about manufacturing motivation? I think there's a couple different ways that we can do this. Number 1 is we get rid of all the easy things that just stand in the way. So I mentioned earlier that motivation is not that it's not there, it's just covered up by other things. So what are the things, what's the little pieces that are in the way? Oftentimes for athletes, it's logistics of their workout. So if I'm going to do a run later in the day, I put my shoes out here and I have all of my equipment next to it. So it's very easy for me. It's sitting there, it's reminding me all day, and I have it. I can just put it on and go for my run. I don't have to worry about it. It becomes a lot harder if all those clothes are in a hamper somewhere and my shoes are hidden away, and I haven't blocked that out on my calendar. So we can actually manufacture motivation by taking care of some of the smaller pieces around what it is you're trying to achieve, getting them organized. As crazy as that sounds, I won't tell your parents that you're thinking about actually cleaning up and actually taking care of things. But there's actually a benefit to some of the tidying to make sure that your motivation can be more easily tapped into and found. That's number 1. Number 2, we can also hack the motivation process by getting social, involving others. So if I do want to do a later day workout, doing it with a group or a training partner that helps hold me accountable, it's also I'm more motivated to do that session because I'm going to be with someone else. I'm not alone. So not that I'm like super rah later in the day, but I've juiced the motivational system by knowing that I'm going to be running with my friend or my friends, and that's super fun for me. I'm actually looking forward to it, both from a physical perspective, but also social. So good for me on multiple levels. And so that element of involving other people can also make things motivational for you as well. And then third, the more sort of like budget or like old school way of doing motivation is really default setting things to how they have to happen. So if you commute to work, well, you got to commute home. So you're going to get a workout in no matter what. If you have the puppies, then tell your significant other, don't walk the dogs. I'm going to walk the dogs when I get home, or I'll take them for a short run and then walk, or whatever that is. So actually like factor things that have to happen in your life such that you can build your activity around it. Another way that people do that here inside the team is there's the WTRL Racing League inside Zwift that happens on Tuesday nights here for US folks. That's a great way to make sure you get that evening workout done because you've got a team, there's a clock, it's a start time. All of these elements are forcing you to laser in and making sure you get that evening session done. May not be the best for your training week, but it will make sure that you're on time and accountable for that motivation. So important to understand that manufacturing motivation isn't just going to a seminar or buying an audiobook or starting to meditate. It's actually setting some of the smaller things in place to make sure through small modifications that you'll be ready to go when you need ready to go. All right? Okay, awesome. All right. The next piece here, the third part here I want to talk about today is creating a mantra. And this is important as well because motivation itself is sometimes there and we can see it, but activating it can be hard. So motivation is often most concentrated when we're actually working out. So take the idea of a run. Sitting here, I want to run, but getting me from here to running, it's going to take about half an hour. I'm not motivated to it, but I'm not moving right now to do it. I've got other things that are competing for my time and attention. And it's always hard at that point in time. You're just sitting here in your street clothes saying, do I or do I not want to work out? It's hard to really get into that space. But once you are working out, once you've got the shoes on and you're out the door and you're running, 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, you get those vibes and you're super happy that you ran. And when you're done, you're very excited that you ran. No matter what that run was, it 6 miles or 10 miles, or did it end up being the 8 miles that I wanted? It doesn't really matter. I got out the door and I ran, which is fantastic. And the motivation actually peaks at the beginning of that activity because we are doing it, right? So when we think about that, how do we get ourselves to a place where we can get there? Some kind of a mantra. There's lots of mantra options out there that are really helpful, right? So some people will say, just some random ideas for you based on stuff I've seen over my lifespan as a coach and athlete. The best workout is the one that just gets you out the door. So it doesn't matter what it is. So there's no great training plan. Just getting out the door makes the biggest difference. So just get out. Just get out, right? Do that. Let's have that. Another one for me is I suck at quitting. So I just don't stop. And so when I run into places and I'm having a tough time in my workout, I don't quit. You know, if I have to stop because of other reasons, fine, but I'm not quitting because it's just not easy or I don't feel good or things like that. So I just don't quit. That's my kind of thing. No highs, no lows, another favorite mantra of mine. So when you're having a good time, remind yourself to be humble. And when you're really being humbled by the world around you, understand that this all too will pass. And there's something else inside there as well. Day 0, another great mentality mindset. Every day is a new day. Like, you can't be mad about yesterday's workout or Monday's session or what happened last weekend. How do I have the best possible day today? What are the decisions and things I can take to do today? And it starts off with this training session as well. That's another one. You probably have some of your own as well, but you want to have some kind of a mantra, something you can put out there. You can put on, by your running shoes or put over where you stare at the wall when you're riding your bike. But what is that thing that really gets you motivated and going, right? Like, let's say that you're in the zone. Define that mantra for yourself and capture it, right? Use it and repeat it and say it, because that actually helps you shape the reality you're inside of. So when I tell myself that I'm not good at quitting, that when I come into those situations where I have to deal with the potential of quitting, because quitting is a process, stopping doing something, I make different decisions at the outset, because I've just said that's a principle that I have in place. What we're talking about now isn't compatible with that principle. What are other options? And we start having those conversations earlier. For you, if your mantra is evolved around winning the day in the first hour or whatever that is, you just, when you get up, I don't want to get up, you're like, but I win the day in the first hour. A great first hour helps me win the day. Then we get out there and we take that first day and we go out and crush it. If we do that, then we're great. Whereas if your mantra is wait until later and see what happens, not as inspirational, but odds are you're not going to get those early day results that you want. So we want to align that mantra with what your specific goals are, but then use that as a tool that we repeat to ourselves. That mantra becomes the story. The story becomes our workouts and our execution. And that workout and execution supports the story. It becomes a very positive cycle over time. And hacking the mantra can actually jumpstart you, right? Put the car on when it's cold, get you out the door when you don't want to, because this is just what you do. It's who you are. It's a story that we're telling ourselves of who we are so that we can become who we are when we tell stories about ourselves. Did you get that? I hope you did. And last but not least, and this is one of my favorites, is powerful self-talk. It can be powerful self-talk. It can be powerful talk to others. Team environments can also be great about this. I found this first when I was serving on the board of the local Girls on the Run here for a good year. And the powerful self-talk is a huge part of their program, where they'll break out into small groups, the sort of social side around the actual training and preparing for a 5K, and do a lot of positive talking about one another, reinforcement, celebrating things and the strengths in all the participants there, not just around their physical aspects, but who they are as people, just turning it into a really net positive experience. So the group will do cheers, right? So they'll put someone in the middle and they'll come up with a cheer for that person. So say that cheer for that person is like, you rock. So they'll be like, the person's in the middle and everybody like gets down, they're like, you rock, and everybody stands up. So it's like your own personal cheerleading squad. And it just fills the person in the center of this circle with electricity. And so you can do that to yourself at a smaller scale. It's obviously much nicer when someone else gives you kudos and says, like, keep going, you're amazing, which you always say no to, but it does help. So having the same thing for yourself is really great. So when you are having those highs or having that great session, like, this is all way to get it done today, Patrick. Nice job, right? That was a solid interval. Can we do it again? I think we can, right? Let's be stronger that next one. Be focused, right? Deep breaths. Things that just keep us in a space, those check-ins, those mantras, those pieces of information that we're giving ourselves, articulating them out, as crazy as it sounds. I say self-talk, like literally talking, like nice work, right? Something you cheer to someone on the side of the marathon, give it a little bit to yourself as well. You can give it to a training partner and they'll reciprocate, hopefully. But like yourself as well, articulating that, celebrating that, capturing that moment, it's actually really powerful. Saying it out loud, just like reading an essay to make sure you're proofreading it. Audible during your workouts for that positive self-talk. Like when you do a great 100, you do like your fastest 100 in your swim set and you wanted to do it and you did it. Like you can say to yourself, that was awesome. That's okay. You don't have to just say it inside your head, like silently, that was awesome, and go back. Like you're not a robot. That was awesome. I'm super pleased with that. Way to go. That's totally fine. You can do that. Or better luck next time. I almost had it. So close. Tomorrow, a new day. That gets registered. It's recorded on the timeline that is you. And by saying it, by articulating it, it makes it so much more tangible and real. All right. So just to recap on today's talk for motivation, understand motivation is a very powerful force and that we actually control a great deal of it. Understand the effects of motivation and what happens to motivation across a day. We talked a little bit about what it means to actually create motivation to be more successful for you, right? Like how do we make sure it doesn't get covered up over the day, blocked, obstructed, hidden, reduced, etc., because things are in the way. And we talked about the role of a mantra. I'd love to hear your mantras if you want to tell us on the team or inside social media. What is your mantra? What do you have? And then finally, some positive self-talk. Like let's think about what that is. Or actually I said powerful self-talk, not just positive. But what do you say to yourself? Like start getting in that habit, after the intervals, after the workout, as you're cooling down, coming back home, before you go in the house and people realize that you are indeed talking to yourself, what are the positive words you're going to give yourself about that workout? Let's get that done. Let's capture that and encode that into the system, planting little seeds of motivation and building that relationship internally with yourself that puts you at the control panel and allows you to access that motivation when you need it most. All right. Thanks for tuning in, folks, for another episode. I'll see you next week.